Or maybe I would go to a grocery store and I would be down to my last few dollars, only able to afford a couple of items, and somebody else might be walking around with a basket of a bunch of goodies. And jealousy would pop up. It was the soup I was living in 24/7, jealousy and bitterness. I was constantly saying life is unfair. I was constantly feeling like I got the short end of the stick and things weren't going my way. And I wasn't able to pursue my dreams, I told myself, because I always have had dreams of working with people on a soul level in ways that are uplifting. So that was my experience for years, just really being miserable and bitter. And then at some point, I ended out realizing that I could either stay on that trajectory or I could take ownership and stop blaming life for being unfair, stop blaming God and my father and everything else, and start taking ownership.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Elliott Robertson, who is a love and joy coach. And who doesn't want a little bit more love and joy in their life? Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life, to wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is a short story from Seth Godin. How do I get rid of the fear? Alas, this is the wrong question. The only way to get rid of fear is to stop doing things that might not work, to stop putting yourself out there, to stop doing what matters. No, the right question is, how do I dance with fear? Fear is not the enemy. Paralysis is the enemy. This is so true. Taking action when you're fearful is the way forward and will provide you the ability to deal with the issues. Last week's action step was, is there a story in your life you're afraid to tell? Then you must tell it. Wow. All these things tie together, don't they? One step builds on the next. Did you tell the story you were afraid to tell? I'm constantly trying to do that on the podcast, to share those things that maybe I don't always share or haven't in the past, and I'm learning to let go and share those stories. I'm still figuring out my pivots going forward. One thing that I did do was to start a new podcast. It's called The Profit Answer Man, and I help small business owners ensure their businesses are profitable. Now, more than ever, it's really important to ensure you build on a solid foundation. If you're a small business owner or know one, have them check out Profit Answer Man Podcast, where I share how to make sure your business is always profitable. Our guest today is Elliott Robertson, who is a love and joy coach. He is an author and a certified happiness workshop leader. Elliott is the author of Say Yes to Life, 7 Keys to Living Full Out from Within, and he's written devotionals for Daily World magazine, as well as articles for the Science of Mind and Wisdom magazine. He holds a master's degree in psychology. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Elliott Robertson. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And I'm excited to learn from you. You know, always want to be happy, but we start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Absolutely nothing. And so I have not been very successful with money handling throughout my life, and I imagine that's going to be changing at this point in my life.
Did you get any lessons, though? Because I know sometimes they may not teach you with words. They teach you with actions. Did you see any of that type of thing growing up, or not so much?
Well, the way it ended out landing internally for me was I saw my father fastidiously jotting down every penny he spent. Every time he got gas, it was on his car notebook, how much money the gas cost, and so on and so forth. And I saw my mother being totally the opposite. And I really thought it was just going overboard, the way my father handled it. And ironically, now at this point in my life, I have learned that not paying any attention to money is not really respecting money, not honoring money, and it's not really good self-care. So I think my father had it right, and I've been making a mistake all these years to follow my mother's pattern.
That's interesting. And so, but I guess they never had conversations. You just watched what was going on throughout that whole thing. What was life like when you were growing up then?
Yeah, I did have 2 households. From the time I was 7 years old, my parents were separated. So, yeah, I was watching them with their relationships with money throughout growing up, yeah.
Okay. We always try to get an idea of where people come from and how they do with those types of things. So currently you are a love and joy coach. What does that mean?
Well, originally my title was happiness coach, and love and joy coach is pretty much the same thing as a happiness coach. I just decided to focus more on joy because I think that's an easier word to understand for some people. Happiness can sometimes be more about the surface level, and I like to go deep with my clients.
So what is the difference between happiness and joy as you look at them?
Well, happiness can sometimes mean happy for outside reasons, happy for good reasons, and there's nothing wrong with that. Joy is the thing that creates happy for no reason. Joy is the quality deep in our heart that we're born with, and it stays there until our dying day. A lot of us are so distracted by the storms in our life, by the chaos, by the monkey mind, by everything. We're so caught up in self-pity, maybe, or for other people it might be jealousy or bitterness. And these things get in the way of getting in touch with the joy that's in our heart. So I really like to be heart-centered, and I think joy really does place us in our heart, directs our attention to looking at the heart.
So you're saying is everyone born with the same joy, or do we all have a different inherent level when we're born?
I really don't know what the research would say about the different levels of happiness. I know that my mentor, Marcy Shimoff, who wrote the book, the New York Times bestseller, Happy for No Reason, she's always telling people that she was born as a sad child, that she looks back at her childhood photographs and she's always sad in those pictures. So perhaps the level of happiness is different and somewhat related to genes or something. I don't really know much about that. I haven't done the research. But when it comes to joy, I'm not interested in measuring how much joy somebody has. It's just a presence, a quality that's a gift from a divinity that we're born with. It's an undercurrent of joy.
So can we change that level? I mean, or are we stuck with what we're given?
Yeah, happiness can definitely go up a notch, and then another notch, and then another notch. And it's really just a matter of cultivating inner harmony, I believe, and cultivating alignment. In other words, if you think of a harmony tree, just to use a metaphor, and if you fertilize the tree by self-trust and other habits that can really cultivate inner harmony, then as a result, happiness is going to show up just sort of on its own without you chasing happiness.
And I guess that's the question, because a lot of times in life, right, what we chase is not what we get. And sometimes you have to do something else to get the result that you want. And you've kind of alluded to that. You have to have inner harmony. Is then happiness the byproduct of that?
Exactly. Happiness is the byproduct, the side effect. In the case of the tree, the harmony tree metaphor, it might be the fruit that the tree bears. And so it's not something that you're going to be able to attain if you are chasing it. It will be elusive. So when I'm working with my love and joy coach clients, I never talk about happiness or joy. I'm always focused on helping people have more inner harmony and have their own insights about how they can do that.
So I guess the question for me is then, how do you achieve inner harmony? And actually, let's take a step, because I like to talk about harmony. And we use the word harmony because balance was difficult for people. Everyone thought balance meant everything was equal, and in life, nothing is ever equal. So we talk about creating harmony with our health and our time and our relationships and our money and all of these different areas. When you talk about inner harmony, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I think that we really do need to begin with the relationship with ourselves. We need to just establish a lot of appreciation for ourselves and inner harmony, and then that will overflow into our relationship with money, our relationship with other people, and so on and so forth. But I really do think that the starting point is and always the maintenance point throughout our entire lives is inner harmony and the self-care that is required to maintain it. There are quite a number of ways to cultivate inner harmony. One of them, for example, is cultivating self-trust. When you make deposits, add coins into the self-trust bank account, that's going to lead to a greater level of inner harmony when you're trusting yourself. And everything we do is either going to add to our level of self-trust or take away from it. I saw somebody earlier today, if I can tell a quick short story.
Yes, please.
Okay, I was at a cafe, and I saw somebody. She was on her way walking out the door. She had, I guess she had been looking in her purse for a credit card and didn't find any and looking for change. She had just ordered a coffee. The coffee was given to her, and she just turned her back and walked out and said she would come back later. The lady who was behind her in line insisted on paying for the coffee for her. It was such a generous, kind act that I was witnessing in that moment, and it really did lift my spirits. And that act of kindness was a moment, I think, when the lady who was paying for the money gave a gift to herself. The gift of knowing that she can trust herself to be kind. The gift of reinforcing her self-image as a kind person. The gift of having a vibration reinforced, a vibration that's a higher consciousness and that's more apt to lead to a state of bliss and happiness.
And we've talked a lot about buying coffee for the person behind you in line just for no reason other than to do it, because giving creates a much happier feeling than receiving. And so I think that's always an important thing to do. And it sounds like this person was able to benefit from that. So you kept talking about self-trust. How is it that people can't trust themselves?
Well, if I were to go to a dinner party, my friend were to call me and say, my friend Igor, who I haven't seen for years and years, he's coming into town. I'm going to see him now, and I'd love for you to meet him. And then I were to show up at the party, and Igor were to say something that I totally disagreed with, and I ended up being tempted to really tell him in unkind ways, in very aggressive ways, that I thought I was right and he was wrong, and just lay out the argument. And then if I went home after the dinner party, I might reflect on that and notice that I was not being kind and caring and sensitive to my dear friend's desire to have a lovely evening, the first time that Igor's come over for dinner at her place. Instead, I was just really following the temptation to be right and to be addicted to being right and all of that. Then at that point, I will have made a withdrawal from my self-trust bank account. Next time I go to a dinner party, I might not trust myself to be civilized so much. And if I had just set that aside and not argued, or argued in a civil tone, then I might have left the dinner party with a deposit in my self-trust bank account, knowing that the next time I'm invited somewhere, I can count on myself to be tender and sensitive and to be caring about how the evening is for other people, not just myself.
This brings up a question, because this comes up a lot in the business world. It comes up in life. Is how do you balance kind of being nice and being helpful, and also kind of balance the money side? Because I think people look at it as an either or. Well, we can't have money and be nice, or we can't do these types of things and also be nice. What have you seen with your work with regards to that?
From where I sit, I think it's important to cultivate a relationship that's harmonious within yourself and all of the relationships in the world with other people, with money. Any relationship you can think of needs to be harmonious. Part of creating a harmonious relationship with yourself, with someone else, or with money really means beginning with honoring the other, or honoring yourself if it's your relationship with yourself. I'm especially interested in the relationship with myself being upon the foundation of honoring the heart in myself, my mind honoring my heart, my mind serving my heart. In the world of money, it would be honoring money as a neutral or an innocent or a door opening to possibilities, just finding something that is good about money to honor, respect, allow money to have its own dignity.
And you said your mind honoring your heart. What does that mean?
I really think that what we need to do is honor our hearts by listening to our hearts. That is how honoring shows up, when we give time to just get in touch with our heart's desires. May not be listening to the heart say something in English or whatever your native language is, but it is about connecting with the heart and being in touch with what the heart desires, what your true, authentic desires are. Those are the desires that reside in the heart, as opposed to the whims and the urges that might be in the mind. I really think this is so important because one of the ways in which we find ourselves lowering our level of happiness or being blocked in raising our happiness another notch is by being trapped in the monkey mind, being trapped in the harsh judgments of the mind. And whenever we might begin to sense the heart's desire to be of service or to enjoy life fully or to love and to be loved, these are the kinds of deep, pure longings that the heart has all the time. When we sense them, we might dismiss them. The monkey mind is very apt to say, oh, that's not practical, your desire to serve people in that way, or no, we don't have the money right now. Maybe after things turn around financially, then I'll be able to pay attention to what you're saying, heart. I'll be able to follow your dream and do some volunteer or whatever it is that the heart is longing to do. So when we really are aligned with our heart and listening to our heart and not dismissing our heart, but at least, saying to our heart, yes, I hear you, and then following it up with some sort of action to really put the honoring into action and prove to the heart that you are listening.
And I call this inner work, but it takes time to do that, because I think too often our mind creates a lot of noise. And I guess the struggle is knowing, how do you know when it's your mind talking to you versus your heart? How do you separate those voices?
I'm not an expert in that field.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I know personally when my heart's speaking and when my mind is speaking, but I'm just not sure if I know how to guide anybody in that.
Oh, that's fine. I always try to figure these things out. It's like, how can you tell where the voices are coming from?
Right. And I might actually have something that might be helpful to some people. When we're asking questions that begin with the word how, we are appealing to our mind to try to figure it out, and it's probably not going to get us very far. When we're asking questions about what we need and require, for example, what do I need and require to listen to my heart? What do I need and require to be happier? Those questions, when they're really seriously attended to, especially with pen and paper, as opposed to in a conversational mode, those questions can help us to take baby steps in that direction and have more clarity about what's needed and required.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we're here to talk about your book. It's called Say Yes to Life: 7 Keys to Living Full Out from Within. Why did you write the book?
This book came to me in the same way that poems come to me, at least initially it did. I just have a habit of always going to a cafe in the morning, and in the old days it was always writing the poems, so I would just be given a first poem, so to speak. It would just, the first line of the poem would come to me, and then after that was written, the next line would show up, and the next line. Sometimes an image that showed up at the start of the poem would repeat itself later, and I would be happily surprised to see a connection, a reason for the image coming in the first place. In any event, what ended up happening when I started this book was I was just writing one paragraph after another. Eventually, I became aware of the theme, that it was say yes to life, and so I had the title of the book, and later on, I had some more clarity about the different chapter titles, the different possible ways to say yes to life.
Well, let's go through some of it. So the book is 7 keys, and some of these keys are interesting. So the first key you talk about is say yes to your expansiveness. Can you help us understand that?
Sure. Maybe if I say a little bit about my experience when I was a young man in New York, that might help.
Okay.
Because that's a wonderful example. I was living in New York. I had very low self-esteem and low confidence, so I was always going from one entry-level job to another and just making peanuts and barely able to afford the rent. And in New York, there's always a lot of opportunities to walk around the streets and to see people at outdoor cafes. And, of course, they looked like they were having a lot of fun with their friends at a cafe I couldn't afford. Or maybe I would go to a grocery store and I would be down to my last few dollars, only able to afford a couple of items, and somebody else might be walking around with a basket of a bunch of goodies. And jealousy would pop up. It was the soup I was living in 24/7, jealousy and bitterness. I was constantly saying life is unfair. I was constantly feeling like I got the short end of the stick, and things weren't going my way, and I wasn't able to pursue my dreams, I told myself, because I always have had dreams of working with people on a soul level in ways that are uplifting. So that was my experience for years, just really being miserable and bitter. And then at some point, I ended out realizing that I could either stay on that trajectory or I could take ownership and stop blaming life for being unfair, stop blaming God and my father and everything else, and start taking ownership. And that was the turning point for me. That's when I began to catch myself when I was bitter. And instead of just swimming around in the soup, I was able to just pivot in a new direction. And then after that, I ended up meeting Marcy Scheimoff, one of my mentors, and learning happy for no reason from her, and so on and so forth. The rest is history. So basically, that is an example of what it means to be contracted. For years, I was contracted, constricted, and I didn't really notice it that much until these days. Looking back, it's really apparent. And then basically when we let go of the blaming, the shaming, when we let go of the complaining, and all of the other ways in which we can contract ourselves, what's left is our true expansive nature. So I feel like expansiveness is the opposite of that. And I also feel like it's not so much a matter of cultivating expansion, but just accepting that as who you really are. And it becomes visible and connected to you when the blocks like shaming and blaming are set aside.
And that's important, right? We have to have the right attitudes is how we look at situations, because most situations are not positive or negative. It's the words that we put on them and the thoughts that we put on them that make a situation what it is. The situations themselves are generally neutral. And what you're saying, it sounds so easy to do, but I think it's really hard to, number one, you have to notice where you are, right? You say now, looking back, you could see it, but in that moment, you probably did not see that you were living in that space.
That's right. Perhaps it is challenging. I do agree with you about what you're saying about the importance of attitudes and how we do create meanings. When we look at the cards that we've been dealt, we have either a contracting response or perhaps a more neutral or more accepting response. And what we're looking at here is the difference, the possibility of being happy for no reason, being happy without it being tied to how much money you're getting from your job, or whether you're able to afford to go to a certain cafe, or how many groceries you're able to buy. Without it being tied to those external things, it's still possible to be happy for no reason at all.
It is, but it's not easy.
Right. And in addition to that, I want to just really echo what you were saying about the importance of attitude, because this is such a key pivot to raising your happiness level a notch. Because when you have an attitude of bitterness or self-pity or victimhood, when your attitude is really in a low vibration, it reinforces that vibration. So there I was going past a line of boyfriends who were together to watch this gay movie and being jealous about how they had their boyfriends. And I was reinforcing, through my low vibration of jealousy, I was reinforcing that same vibe within me. And when we are able to lift up our vibration to something higher, we're not reinforcing that, we're reinforcing the gratitude vibration or something else. Over time, if we're consistent with these vibrations of gratitude, that will make a difference. I prefer to say it's a gradual transition usually. At least for me, it was gradual, as opposed to a difficult transition. If you're looking for a quick fix, yeah, it's definitely difficult. It's not going to happen by waving a wand. If you're committed to your path of personal development and spiritual growth, or your path of becoming more powerful inwardly and more able to fulfill your dreams of serving the world, or whatever it is, then that can fuel the journey and can allow yourself to be patient with the baby steps.
And so we talk about this a lot with the compound interest curve, which basically is you spend a lot of time doing and seeing very little results. But if you keep going over time, little by little, things do change. And eventually that curve really bends and things become amazing. But you have to keep showing up and keep doing the work, even when it seems like nothing is happening.
That's a beautiful analogy. I so appreciate your sharing that with me. I had never thought of it that way.
Yeah, we find that all the principles we talk about here on the show, financial and otherwise, they all overlap. They're universal laws, and they apply to pretty much everything. And so it's understanding that and then applying it. So your second key is say yes to your uniqueness. And each of us is entirely unique. We have different DNA, different fingerprints, and different experiences. And even if we go to the same experience, two people at the same experience can have a vastly unique experience of it. When you said say yes to your uniqueness, what were you referring to?
Saying yes to your uniqueness is partly saying yes to the unique gifts that you bring with you into the world. For me, one of my gifts is definitely writing, and I love saying yes to that. And one of the ways I say yes to that is by writing, just doing that every day. I can't stop myself. So identifying what the gifts are and celebrating them and practicing them, that's one of the ways in which you can say yes to your uniqueness for sure.
And so I think for a lot of people, this one's a struggle in the sense that what is unique to us and easy, we take for granted. And we don't appreciate the uniqueness in the gift we have sometimes because we don't realize how much of a gift it is.
I love the word appreciate, and I enjoy doing an appreciation exercise sometimes, which goes like this. Something I appreciate about myself is my tenderness. Something I appreciate about myself is my love for cats. Something I appreciate about myself is my ability to write. Something I appreciate about myself is my heart's capacity to love, and on and on. Appreciation is a wonderful starting place for avoiding taking for granted, as you were saying. Just flashing that flashlight onto appreciation by sitting down with pen and paper or doing it verbally in the shower or whatever, and just every day, consistently. We were talking about the importance of consistency. Every day, writing down 3 things that you appreciate about yourself. And, that really is so powerful, not because appreciation is powerful, but because appreciation is a foundation, a doorway into gratitude. If you do the appreciation exercise for, say, 3 weeks every day, and then you wind up with 3 times 21, you're going to wind up with about 70 or so things you appreciate about yourself if you do 3 different things every day. And then if you go through that list and translate each thing on the list to gratitude. I am grateful for my love of cats. I am grateful for my love of coffee. I am grateful for my capacity to love. I'm grateful for my gift for writing. If you end out with gratitude statements, that's going to take you to an even higher vibe than vibration. And the vibration for some people is a really important first step, because sometimes the leap from where we are right now in our life, if we're waking up and we're dreading the day before us, going into gratitude right off the bat can be a little bit difficult. I feel like appreciation is a bridge to gratitude.
And one of the things that I've heard Tony Robbins say is to change your life, change your expectations for appreciation. So basically, I think what he means by that is that we have so many expectations of life. And if we just stop expecting everything and appreciate everything we have in the moment, that it changes us to a life of gratitude, right?
Absolutely. I think that expectations can get in the way. I feel like expectancy and expectations are opposites, even though the words are almost the same. They can be opposites. If you walk out the door with a sense of expectancy, if you're wondering what good things are going to come your way, if you walk out with wonderment and anticipation or expectancy, that's a wonderful way to start the day, to walk out the door with that sense in your heart, in your mind, just openness. If you have expectations, that can close the heart and dampen the day. It's sort of like making a demand. Things have to go according to the way I want them to, and I expect them to go like A, B, and C. And if that doesn't happen, well, I'm not so sure I'm going to be happy. Expectations can really get in the way of a happy life.
And life never happens the way you want it to.
Yes, it sets you up for frustration. Exactly.
Exactly. So the third key is say yes to the new. What does that mean?
One of the things that say yes to the new means is it means to be open to new possibilities. And I encourage people to go ahead and be willing to explore possibilities that maybe you've never explored before, to just be open to brainstorming for new ways of encountering the world, new ways of responding to the world.
And I tell people, like, even just going to work, change your drive in every day. Take a different route. Try something new. It doesn't have to be this big, scary thing.
Absolutely.
So the fourth key is saying yes to knowing what you want. I find this one kind of interesting in the sense that I don't think most people know what they want. I don't think they've actually sat down and thought through and said, this is what I want. They tend to either get bombarded with advertisements, and so they think they want something, or somebody puts them on a track and says, this is what you should do. But I don't know. I don't know that people actually take enough time to figure out what they really want. What did you mean by this key, and what have been your observations?
Earlier, we were talking about the importance of listening to the heart, and this is really the main focus, the main chapter that focuses on that. I really trust the heart to know what we want better than I trust my mind to know what it is that I want. I really feel like we all have, this is the place where there's a lot of commonality. We were talking about say yes to your uniqueness, and that's wonderful. At the same time, I feel like there are a lot of things that we all want as part of our human nature. For example, I think we all want to be able to enjoy life fully. We all want to serve. Whether or not we've really acknowledged that or we're aware of that, I think that's a very common thing at any rate, to want to be of service and to contribute. We want to love. We want to be loved. So it's getting in touch with whatever it is that the heart yearns for and longs for. We want intimacy. I think for many of us, intimacy includes intimacy in our relationship with ourselves, that kind of transparency that is able to get beyond self-deception. We want to, have that honest relationship with ourselves where we look at what's going on very squarely. I want to have an intimacy with the cosmos for sure. So intimacy shows up in all sorts of forms, in addition, of course, to intimacy with those who are in our lives.
For the fifth key, you talk about say yes to freedom from the past. And one of the things I've noticed in literally every psychology book I've read is that most of the reason that adults are suffering is because of something that happened to them when they were a kid, and they're stuck there in that past. And I think you even kind of alluded to some of those things in your past with your dad. Is that what you're talking about in this chapter, or is there more to it than just that?
Well, first of all, that sort of is what my story sounded like, I suppose. And since my father has passed away a couple of years ago, I have come to realize that it was totally distorted vision on my part to blame him for anything, and it was totally a power play on my part. So anyway, he was truly a wonderful father, and I'm not just going into denial mode here. But stepping aside from that, you're raising a really wonderful point. So once again, you're asking,
when you say yes to freedom from the past, what did you mean by that?
Yes. In that chapter, while it's true that I could have written a long book that got into a lot of the things that you were just talking about a moment ago, I ended up writing a short book. And so all of the chapters do not cover all of the possible terrain. There have been a lot of books that have already covered the wounds that we've had in the past, and covered forgiveness and covered acceptance of the wounds and so on and so forth. And I don't really get into that very much at all in my book. For me, I've focused on releasing the past self-images. Here, I'm very much interested in just being willing to say everything I thought about myself in the past may have been wrong. What if the way God sees me is so very different from the way I've always seen myself? What if I've never been able to see as much glory and light within me as God sees in me, or as the quantum field sees in me, or however you want to frame it? So I'm very much interested in letting go of all of the beliefs that you want to, especially the limiting ones, and starting from square one in terms of building a new image. This is a very challenging thing. According to Richard Rohr and according to St. Francis, it's much easier to let go of beliefs that are not about who you are than to let go of beliefs that sit near your identity.
It's hard to change ourselves. I know that.
Well, I always am not so sure if I want to buy into that belief, because I really do think that, yes, in the short term, it might seem like that's true. And at the same time, if you're willing to go gradual with baby steps, once again, I guess we already sort of touched on this earlier in our conversation. But if you're willing to just go slowly and gradually and be consistent, then progress is so very much possible. I certainly have seen that for myself. I wake up with joy and gratitude these days most of the time, and that was not true when I was younger.
Yeah, you can change. It takes time. And, it's simple to let go of a belief, but it's hard to do it, right? It comes back to these same principles constantly that kind of go through. Your next one's interesting because, I'd like for you to explain it, and then we can get a better understanding of it. But say yes to grief. It doesn't sound like something people want to say yes to.
And it may very well be the most important say yes in the entire book. If you end up just choosing to read one chapter, that might be the most important. Although I must say that first step of saying yes to expansiveness and letting go of all of the unwillingness to take ownership is really a foundational key first step as well. Say yes to grief is basically about accepting and not denying, and it's also about allowing all of yourself to feel all of your feelings full out 110% from one moment to the next. We can just allow the sadness and the anger to show up, to be our visitors in our body, in our being, and then we can let them go also. I'm not advocating to nurse a grudge or nurse a certain feeling and feed it and hold on to it tightly for the next 10 years. But I am definitely saying it's so important not to repress any feelings. And one of my favorite metaphors or examples for this is if you imagine a beach ball with many different colors or many different feelings on it, sitting on the surface of a swimming pool, there it is. It takes a lot of energy to push that beach ball down under the surface, and pushing your feelings just really so they're not really so easy to look at and to experience just really doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help you at all, and it just drains your energy.
That it does. And the last key is say yes to happiness and joy. And I guess my question is that something like, do people say no to that?
I think a lot of us sometimes can be addicted to staying where we are, to staying in misery or having some resistance to unhappiness. because that's where we've been for years and years. And so that's what's familiar and that's what's comfortable. But I'm not going to really explore that any further because I'm not an expert in the field of addictions. What I do focus on in the book, as far as this goes, is just allowing ourselves to be vast and spacious and expansive. So much so, just recognizing that the soul is so much more than anything we've ever really encountered, certainly so much greater than the body and the feelings. And so when we are stepping into our spacious self, that allows enough room for us to experience anger, happiness, sadness, any feeling at all, and also to experience that undercurrent of joy that we were born with. I really do believe that we all come into the world with an undercurrent of joy in our heart, and it's there until we die. And unfortunately, because of the chaos and the swirl of things going on in our life, the 10,001 things, because of the monkey mind and the harsh judgment, because of all sorts of different distractions and conditions and stuff that we encounter, we just don't necessarily make contact with that undercurrent of joy. We don't really notice it. I really do believe that it's quite possible to experience the sadness and the grief, and at the same time to tap into that undercurrent of joy and just be aware of it and just know that the joy is still there, never blemished, never diminished.
So we've covered 7 keys. Do they build on each other? Are they totally separate? Do you have to have each one perfect? How do they all kind of integrate?
They are all standalone, and so I could have arranged this book in just about any order. It sort of randomly fell into place in this order. It's certainly not steps. It's just a bunch of keys.
And so each one unlocks a different part of life. And do we need to use all 7 keys?
You know, I really don't know the answer to that question. I imagine that perhaps one person at one moment might find one key more helpful than another. And then at another moment in life, another key might be more helpful. But this is something I haven't really given much thought to. I appreciate that question. I'm going to sit with it for the next few days. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. We always try to go a little deeper and figure out some of these different things and how they all fit together. One of the things that you've been talking a lot in some of your answers is about vibration and vibration levels. Do you have any advice on how to change your vibration levels?
I feel like the keys may be helpful in that respect. If you are saying yes to your uniqueness, for example, that might help you to come into a greater state of happiness. Saying yes is very often celebrating. That's another way of looking at it. So we are, when we're saying yes to who we are, we're celebrating who we are. We're opening the doorway to love, to falling in love with who we are. All of the keys in my book are really pointing us in the direction of who we truly are, our true self, away from the monkey mind, which is not really who we are, and pointing us to our heart. And so when we are spending more time giving attention, focusing on our true self, we will naturally find that our vibration is lifted. Also, the keys in this book are kind of like directions to walk in, and they are all really pointing to the same direction, the direction of heaven, you might say, the direction of divinity. And it's all about what direction we're going in. There was a saint named, I think it was St. Catherine of Siena, who said that heaven is not a destination, it's not a place. It's the direction you're walking in. And if you're walking in the direction of heaven, then you are in heaven. And if you're walking in another direction, you are in hell. And I have certainly been spending time walking in all sorts of different directions throughout my life.
And I think you have to enjoy the journey. I mean, that's life is a journey. It's not a destination. And if you're not enjoying the journey, then change your direction, right? That's basically what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And yes, enjoying the journey is so important. I really do believe that we all have that as one of our purposes in life.
So as you've been coaching people, is there a common mistake that people make that you see that you help them with? Are there some commonalities amongst them?
I guess there are a number of different things that can get in the way that show up a lot. A lot of people have the same patterns. After all, we're all human. And one of the things that does show up a lot, I don't know if I've already mentioned it or not, one of the things that shows up is just sort of getting stuck in the monkey mind. And one of the ways of looking at getting stuck, just like you're not really making any spiritual growth, you're not getting any closer to your dreams. Life is the same old, day after day, month after month, year after year. One of the ways of looking at being stuck is imagining that your life is a bunch of stepping stones, and you can see the one that's before you, so you know what your next step is. And now just imagine that these stones are arranged in a circle. I find that a lot of people tend to be walking in a circle, and then they get to the same stone they were at a year ago, and they sort of recognize the stone, and they keep going in the circle. So ideally, what we can do is change the path so that we're walking on a path that just goes out to the horizon. Maybe we can't see exactly what we're headed for at the horizon, but just knowing that we're going to the step that leads in that direction is helpful.
That it is. Is there anything else that you wanted to share on how to have love and joy, but didn't get a chance to?
I think we covered a lot of bases. I didn't really come with any expectations.
Sometimes there's these things that, you wish that someone would ask and they never get asked. And then it's like, I wish we had talked about that. And sometimes that happens to me, but it's usually like 20 minutes later that I remember what it was that I should have said.
I so appreciate your asking that, and I will very quickly share a concern I have. The Washington Post recently published a report about how the youngsters are having an alarming increase in the rate of depression, according to the statistics of a recent study. The other age groups are also going up a little bit, but the youngsters, the teenagers, are skyrocketing in their levels over the last few years. So I'm just really eager to encourage people who have teenagers in their life to just let those teenagers know that things can get better, that so many people have years in their youth when things are really pretty bad. And just because the last 2 or 3 years have been rotten doesn't mean that life is always going to be rough sledding, that we do have cycles in life. The 17-year-old doesn't have a frame of reference necessarily as much as we older people do for life going in cycles, for good times being followed by bad times, and so on and so forth. And so just really letting them know that this isn't the way it's always going to be, that there's a great possibility that great harmony and happiness will show up.
And that's very true. I just finished reading a book called Gen Z, and it talks about how this generation, every generation has their themes. And that is one of the things in this generation is anxiety levels are through the roof. And I think there's two underlying things that are going on that may cause that. One is social media. It's just constant bombardment of people pretending to live lives they are not living. And so that makes people feel like they are not enough. And if you don't feel like you're enough, that's the underlying thing that will cause the majority of your problems. And the second thing is parenting. We don't let our kids fail. There is nothing wrong with failing. There is nothing wrong with struggle. You need to let your kids struggle, and they have to go through these things because this is how you become tough. You want to build mental toughness, you're going to have to struggle. You can't build mental toughness by making everything easy. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I'm not an expert in that field, but I do appreciate your thoughts, and I do think that you may have a bullseye there.
Well, thank you. So we always like to have people take action. Based on our conversation today, what is one action step people can take to move forward this week?
I'm going to encourage everyone to go ahead and, if you feel like doing that appreciation exercise that I went over earlier, go for it. And, when we get to where my website is, you will find out that I do have an exercise, that exercise on the website as a free offering.
And we'll cover that in a minute. Before we do, we've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Self-acceptance.
And that's big. We can't be abundant until we accept ourselves, and no one else is going to do it for us, right?
That's right.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Oh, it would have been nice to have learned that I'm capable of being powerful, being an adult, choosing into the beauty that I am, choosing into experiencing my nobility. I was just always so blind throughout my youth to who I really am. And so I wish I had learned earlier in life about saying yes to my divinity.
And I think that's probably summed up, and I've heard people say this, we're spiritual beings living in a human world. We're not human beings living in a spiritual world. Does that make sense?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm still working on that one. What one piece of wisdom would you give to an 18-year-old?
We already covered that. I would tell an 18-year-old that life can get better, and that just because things may have been going bad in the past doesn't mean that they're going to continue to.
And that's very true. I think we probably need to do a better job of empowering our youth. And hopefully over time, we shall start to do that. If people would like to find out more about you and connect, what is the best way for them to do that?
If you go to www.sayyestolifebook.com, you can get a free gift, which includes the appreciation exercise, the instructions for how to do that. It also includes a 15-minute guided visualization, and it also includes an excerpt from Say Yes to Life from the book, so you can get a little taste of it and see if it's right for you or not. That's, once again, it's www.sayyestolifebook.com.
And I will put that in the show notes so that you can just click on it and make it easy. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elliott.
It was my pleasure. I'm so grateful to have the chance to be with you and your community.
Is your life full of love and joy? The only way it can be is by changing the person in the mirror. It's not always easy, and sometimes we need help. Change doesn't happen overnight. It's small steps. We just need to show up and keep taking those steps. Even aha moments still take a few years to bring about the change we seek to see. What change do you want to see in yourself? What's the plan to make that happen? We all have choices. It's time to make yours and take that step forward, even if it's fearful, which is where we started out today. This week's action step: try the appreciation exercise. As Tony Robbins says, turn your expectations into appreciation and your world changes in an instant. It's all about gratitude. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. So, what's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through a coaching and accountability? Just email me. We can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.